I want to welcome you this afternoon to the launch of our food waste recycling program. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and we're going to be seeing a video which will start the process, and then after the video speak in substance about what the county's plans are. But I do want to take the opportunity to recognize some of the guests that we have here with us. We have a number of elected officials, beginning with members of the Westchester County Board of Legislators. They are our partners in all of the decisions that we make, and when the executive branch announces things, we do that knowing or believing or hoping that we have the support of our friends in the legislature. So let me recognize Catherine Parker, legislator from the Sound Shore. Catherine? And you may applaud. I've never been into this hold your applause stuff. You know, we like getting our applause. Damon Marr from New Rochelle, East Chester, Tuckahoe. Nancy Barr is with us, Rybrook, Portchester, Harrison. And we have representation from Kitley Koval's office. Erica Pierce is here. Thank you, Erica. And if we have other legislators arriving, we'll make sure we recognize them as we go forward. We're very pleased to have with us some other elected officials. Lena Crandall, who's a Scarsdale Village trustee, is with us here today. Lena, thank you. And we thank Scarsdale for their leadership in this particular area of public policy. Malcolm Froman, a village trustee from Larchmont Village, is here. Thank you, Malcolm. Okay. The Mayor Supervisor of Harrison has joined us, Ron Belmont. Mayor of the City of White Plains, Tom Roach, is with us. Mayor of the village town of Mount Kisco, Gina Picanic, is with us. Who is running the government today? No, they're all in this room. We also want to recognize Doug French, is a former mayor of my hometown, Rise City. Doug, thank you for being here. The executive team that I'm very fortunate to be part of is with us. Our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins. Our Director of Operations, Joan McDonald. Our Deputy Director of Operations, Emily Saltzman. And our omnipresent Director of Communications, Catherine Chaffee, who is orchestrating us here today. And we have with us many other people from our team. Aviva Meyer is here. Ellen Hendricks, who's Intergov and a former Greenberg Town Councilwoman. Chelsea Pagano, Carl Pagano, Carolyn Fortino, Emily Lavin. We've just been joined by the Mayor of the City of Rye, Josh Cohn, who's just joined us. Josh, thank you. Our Department of Environmental Facility is the critical department to implement these things. We'll talk a lot more about this when we get into the substance. Vincent Kopicki, our commissioner, is here. Deputy Commissioner Lou Vitrone is here. And we have a new Deputy Commissioner in this department, a person who's been a longtime friend of mine, a longtime Westchester County legislator, former chairman of the Board of Legislators, and now we brought him on board to deal with the topic of sewer consolidation, which I'm sure will be some other press conference at some other point in time. Mike Kaplowitz. And we want to thank all of the members of the Department of Environmental Facility. Give us a wave if you're part of that team, because they are the folks that know how to do this work that's ahead of us. Melissa Rattini, who's here as well, is one of the key people that we're going to be relying on. We're going to open the door a little bit later on for questions, and when I give you the deer in the headlight look, I will turn like this, and I'll look for Melissa and Lou and Vin to help us out. And from our executive team, Peter McCart, who's our Director of Sustainability, is with us. I missed some people. Someone will tell me about that while we're watching the video. We want to first start with a video that sort of frames the issue in front of us, and then we'll take it from there. So, Joe, if you would.
Hi, my name is Nadia Hall, and I'm the community environmentalist here at Teatown Lake Reservation in Austin, New York. So we're about a 1,000-acre nature preserve and education center with about 15 miles of hiking trails. We see tens of thousands of visitors each year, from school-age children all the way through adulthood. But right now, especially around the holidays, food waste is a big issue. We usually waste about 40% of the food that we should be eating each year, and between Thanksgiving and New Year's, it actually increases by about 4 million pounds of food. So what we can do is we can plan ahead. Make your shopping list before you go to the grocery store, know how many people are coming over your house, and do the best you can to not purchase too much food. Then with those leftovers that you do inevitably have, make sure that you're eating those. Get creative, try new recipes. And then if you do have access to home compost, either in your backyard or commercially through your town, make sure you are composting all those leftovers that you don't have a chance to eat. Composting is a way that you can take all those nutrients and that energy that you didn't eat and really feed it back into the environment. So it's made up of 4 main parts, and those are the greens, which bring the nitrogen, and that's all your food waste, like your apples and your banana peels and things like that. And then you have your browns, and that's going to be bringing carbon, and those are things like leaves and twigs, maybe newspaper, coffee grounds. Finally, you need water and air, and that's going to bring water and oxygen to those microbes that you need to break that material down into compost. And what you're going to be left with is something called sometimes black gold. It's called humus, and it's a soil conditioner. It's really nutrient dense, and it's going to improve whether it's your lawn or your potted plants or anything that you have. So you have a couple options at home. You can go and Google certain composters, find one that you really like, that you feel comfortable, that you feel like you're going to want to use in your backyard, and purchase one of those. Or if you really want to keep it super simple, you can even use like a cage of chicken wire. Just make a cylinder of it, make sure that it will be touching the ground. Maybe cover it if you think you're going to be getting a lot of rain or something like that, but it's more than possible to do at your home, and it's really advised. Generally, it is something that you can start any time of year outside. Choose an area that you're comfortable with, that you have access to, that again, you're very comfortable with them too.
And in a few minutes, Nadia will be here to share some of her thoughts, and we appreciate your involvement in this video, sort of laying out some of the issues. In Westchester County government, we have any number of different policy issues that we have to tackle. If you walked in and went upstairs, you will see that right now we're conducting a job fair with 28 employers to try to help find jobs for the 268 employees of Arrowwood that were left without employment when Arrowwood's doors closed. If you were with us 2 days ago at Pace University, we kicked off our efforts for Census 2020, which is a cooperative effort between the county government, local governments, as well as some support from the state government. Last week, we launched our new tourism campaign called Beyond Expectations. We also last week began the meetings with local government officials to implement our affordable housing study, which we issued last November, in an important public policy. We were in Albany to lobby on the New York State budget, which has great impact on the county and local governments. And this Friday, we'll have a representative of our government up in Connecticut to lobby in Hartford against tolls on I-684. There's so many different issues that are happening all at the same time. But the issue of climate crisis is one of those overarching issues. And we are a county government. We're not a national government. We're not a state government. But we have to do everything that we can think of in order to push back on this issue. And one of the clear areas is to expand our recycling and to do it in an environmentally sensitive way. And by dealing with the issue of food scrap waste, we are reducing the amount of garbage that we burn and putting it into a more economically feasible and a better environmental recycling use, and as Nadia pointed out there, that creates a product that has value to us as an individual. So with that thought in mind, and based frankly on the energy that already was happening in local governments across this county, we engendered a food waste study. We contracted with Woodard Curran, very prominent consultants here. Anthony Catalano is with us from that organization. Anthony, if you can say hello. And we're here to talk a little bit about the problem, a little bit about what that study does, and then what we're actually going to do about it, which is really the most important part of our time here today. So a few basic facts on food waste. 40% of food in this country is wasted. 40%. Not necessarily on the dishes that are presented to me, as you can see by my waistline, but the reality of it is that we have quite a bit of food waste, commercial as well as residential food waste. And that winds up in our garbage stream unless we make a conscious effort to do something else with it. And at the same time we have that, we also know that in a state of 19 million people, 2.5 million New Yorkers struggle to have enough to eat. That says something about our society. What we can do as a county is part of that responsibility. Food makes up 18% of our solid waste stream, and that is a very significant portion of what that waste stream is. New York State has set in motion for 2022 laws that will affect commercial food recycling, and whether they're major hotels or institutions, other entities, there are certain things that will be done based on New York State law. We in Westchester County want to be able to look at this problem from a host of different areas. So we engendered a food waste study with Woodard Curran that will help us understand what the need, the potential, and the long-term solutions would be for food waste recovery. But also understanding that the long-term prospects would not sit at counterpoint to the things that we need to do in some shorter range time frame. Now, the Woodard Curran food waste analysis, we received this report a few weeks ago, identified that the commercial food waste in our county represents 125 tons a year generated and 103 tons a year disposed. 22 tons of food was recovered yearly. It's being done privately, mostly through supermarkets, but 21% of commercial waste is food waste. Again, a significant portion of our waste stream. That's on the commercial side. On the residential side, we have 85,537 tons a year that are generated and disposed. It's really unknown how much is being composted on an individual basis. And we know that there are individuals and certain organizations that compost, and in an ideal world, if everybody had the ability to compost within their residential unit, had enough space in their house and desire to do this properly, it would reduce a lot of these numbers that we've heard. But we have to get much beyond that if we're going to make an impact, because 22% of residential waste is food scraps. So Woodard Curran gave us some long-term recommendations, things that we now have to discuss as a government about what we would do to deal with this problem over the long haul of time. They gave us 3 very specific recommendations. One of them is to co-locate a small anaerobic digester next to the Wheelabrator facility. You've all had lunch already, right? You don't mind I get into it? Okay, I'm sure you haven't had lunch already. Now, not that I knew this from birth, but an aerobic versus an anaerobic process, 2 very different processes. The aerobic process usually needs more land, and it's done in the open. Air is injected into it in one fashion or another. The soil is turned over. That's what you generally think of a backyard composting site or a larger municipal site. Takes more land. There are odors involved in that, and if you do it on a large enough basis, there is traffic, trucking that comes in and out. Anaerobic is done inside a contained environment, and that contained environment you use bacteria and other natural forms to break it down where you don't have air to be able to do that. So this first recommendation is to create a small digester next to the Wheelabrator factory, which exists right now in northern Westchester. We're looking at that project representing having the capacity of about 10,000 tons. We just did some tonnage numbers a few seconds ago. That could represent 10,000 tons of material that could be repurposed and recycled in an anaerobic fashion. Now, it would take us somewhere to the tune of $5 to $7 million to create that site, and at 10,000 tons, we could satisfy some percentage of Westchester County's tonnage, but not enough for the whole county. The second recommendation is a co-digestion facility at the Peekskill Water Resource Recovery Facility. And when we think of our common language sewer treatment plants, there's 7 of them that exist around the county, 4 on the Sound Shore, 3 on the Hudson. We would be recycling food waste at the same time that we recycle other waste. And that could create a problem in the end product that would then be marketed. We talked about how the end product of food waste breaking down could be used for nutrients and then used for further agriculture. That would not be possible if it were mixed with human waste. There are other elements to it. Again, it was outlined in the Woodard Curran report. This represents an issue that we have to look at, but we have to determine how we deal with the environmental issues site-wise. The third and probably most permanent way to resolve the issue on a countywide basis is to create in Westchester County some version of what currently exists in Ulster County, which is where we're tracking our food waste to now. That would be a large standalone food waste digester in Westchester County. We're talking about needing a 4-acre site, and that's a significant amount of land in the size that Westchester is. We're looking at a facility that would generate traffic because you're going to be moving product in from all across the county, and the issue of odors may in fact happen when you have that large a situation. And so siting a property like that will be difficult. It will not be cheap. We're talking somewhere in north of $25 million to do that. But that would be the complete answer and solution to this issue. And looking at those 3 points will be things now that the Board of Legislators and our executive branch will discuss to determine how we would allocate money, how we would go about implementing one or more of those things, and determining what might happen in the long term. That's the part of the study. But now we move to action steps, because it is never sufficient to study something without having some idea of what we're going to do. So we've immediately identified 3 things that we're prepared to move on right away. We are targeting for September of 2020 that the county will take over the transport of existing food waste scraps from all municipalities that have a food waste scrap program. The county will pay for that transport, so that means the Larchmont Mamaroneck Joint Sanitation Committee will not, Rice City will not, Scarsdale will not. We've been joined by a number of other elected officials. I'll catch up with you in a second. But the cost for the transport would not fall on the local government. The program would be open to all municipalities. We have somewhere in the vicinity of 20 or so municipalities that have currently established some form of food waste scrap collection and recycling. A couple of curbside, most are central depot locations. But we would contract with the waste hauler. We'd have a singular contract, and then that waste hauler would be able to do the collection and transport to Ulster County at no additional cost to the municipality. Now, if the municipality chooses to go with a curbside program, then that portion of the costs would be borne by the municipality, and the municipality has to determine their existing equipment, can they fit it, and so forth. The concern you have with food waste is leakage, that there's liquefied elements to that waste product, and trucks that carry that must be secured from that leakage so we don't create a pollution problem from that. And most of us would be looking at probably having to obtain some new equipment if we're going to move in that direction. There are a couple of communities that are doing that now, either on a permanent or temporary basis, and I'm sure amongst the relationships between municipalities there's dialogue about what would happen there. But by the county picking up the transportation costs, we make this affordable to communities, and let's be candid, not just the wealthy communities. There are communities in this county where there's property tax wealth, and they're able to take this on. But there are other communities that do not have equivalent per person property tax wealth, and we can't leave them out of this. So doing this, we do it for Yonkers, and we do it for Pound Ridge if they choose to plug into the program. And those are decisions that we will leave to each of the local officials to determine how to do it. And this is where I get to turn to Vin Kapicki and Joan McDonald and Emily Saltzman and say, we've made the commitment, you guys figure out the logistics of it, but we intend to do this in a way that now, without that added cost of transportation, it now becomes possible for us to take our current level of collection and move it up to a higher level and take more of that out of the waste stream. When we recently renegotiated our contract with Wheelabrator, which handles our garbage to energy situation, we negotiated in it a carve-out of 50,000 tons, which is certainly more than we're doing right now in food waste recycling, and that's an aspirational goal that we expect to reach. And we have the opportunity, I think, if we start hitting high numbers on that list, to renegotiate that carve-out. But what it means is that the communities will not pay any additional if we're doing the transportation, and if you're paying a certain amount right now to dispose of the actual cost of the tonnage, that won't change, so there's no added cost if we pick up the transportation costs. Now, we expect to launch that by September, and that will require us to develop the appropriate RFP, put it out into the industry. You know, we're dealing with the waste collection industry, which obviously has its own patterns of how they bid on contracts and, you know, how we deal with them. But we will take on that responsibility. And having done that, we think it will take us until September to sign off the way we want. And we do believe we have the money in our budget to do that. And I'm sure my friends at the Board of Legislators will look at that and have some discussions with us in public session. We have been joined, by the way, by Ruth Walters from the county legislature as well. And we will try to make sure that we show how those dollars fit into place. However, if we're going to move ultimately to something more substantial, then we need to test out a few things. And that's why the most immediate thing we're going to do is a 6-week pilot program, and this we will launch in March. What this pilot program will do is take a look at the Yonkers transfer station and determine if we can take a bay and use it temporarily, 6-week period of time, as the drop-off point for food scrap recycling. And the concerns that I referenced before about making sure that the equipment can properly be sealed and transport that to us, ultimately that's how we dispose of our garbage and our recyclables today. We do it through a series of transfer stations around the county, and if the county's going to take over the full function of it, we have to know that our transfer station, singular or multiple, wherever we go, has the capacity to do that. And we're going to see in a 6-week test starting in March how that would work. And we're going to be contracting with one of the communities. We'll let those communities that could participate in have a discussion, and then we'll come to some agreement for the test. And then in that particular case, the scraps will be transported to the transfer station, and then the county will be responsible to taking it to Ulster for composting. And we're going to learn something from that process, and we hope the learning of that process will inform us of what we would do on a long-term basis. The 6 weeks is not for it to become the permanent situation. The permanent situation is permanent. The midterm situation is what we hope to set up for September. But this test will tell us something very important, and we hope it'll give us some good insight. There's a third element that we intend to implement, and we hope to implement that by the summer, bless you. And that will be done at the H-MRF in our Grasslands campus. There we are going to establish a small-scale composting which would be appropriate for an individual municipality. We are going to look to work with one of the local governments. We're open-ended as to which one we do. It'll have to be a community sized for the amount of land that we have, but we intend to set up, in essence, a one community municipal composting facility on our land that would then become a prototype for any community that wanted to set up one on their property. And so, just to use the example of it, Madam Mayor, you would have folks come down and look at how we're doing this. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we came to closure with a community like Elmsford, not dissimilar in size to Mount Kisco, that we would do that project for Elmsford, and then we would look at principles that would represent whether or not it could be replicated. And then communities that have the available space, not everybody does. You know, some communities are built up to the max and don't have available space for a local composting facility. But just as we hope that everyone that can do composting on their own home site will do it, that'll take that much out of the waste stream. Whatever communities can justify doing their own composting in their facility, take that out of the waste stream, and then our county program will be designed to pick up in those communities that can't have those or choose not to have those alternatives. And then, of course, there's going to be an end product out of this composting, which will represent exactly how we market that, and I'm not sure we're going to do with the money for that. Someone will figure that one out, I'm sure. But we'll look to see as well if this concept can gain us some grant money from the state government, maybe the federal government, I don't know. But it gives us an opportunity to then pattern that, and for every community, while we are transporting their waste to Ulster, they can come and look and determine if that's an option. So those are the three immediate things that we plan to implement. We've also been joined by County Legislator Kitley Koval, and so she and the other individuals that I represented will be taking a look at that. And we invite all of the other municipalities in the county to look at this, to see how this works in the short term, and then how it works in the long term. I'll use this opportunity to recognize Sarah Goddard, a councilwoman from the city of Rye, who is with us. Nancy Seligson, the supervisor of the town of Mamaroneck, has joined us. This is another George Latimer, test your knowledge of local elected officials. Dana, who do we have back there? We have Victoria, Dana Leverberg, town supervisor of Ossining, and Victoria Garrity, the mayor of Ossining Village, is also with us. And I'm sure other people will point out who I've missed. And by the way, I want to thank those who are elected officials from municipalities, as you were a couple of days ago at Census, for being here again. We're not trying to make you spend all your time with us, but we really want to show you that this county government believes in being a partner of local government. I just came back from lobbying at the state. You don't always get, and I served in the state government, you don't always get the sense that the state is on your side. But I do want you to have the feeling that we really do want to make this a partnership between local government. But it is your decisions about how you want to handle your local compost, but we think this is another step in the proper environmental direction. I'll close my comments, invite Nadia to come up and share some thoughts. But we realize that we have a climate crisis. If we don't realize that, then we're foolish. I've heard people come to me and say all kinds of things they'd like me to do, shut the airport down, do some very serious things that are not necessarily within my power as a county executive. But there are things that we can do. We're working to convert our fleet away from diesel buses and standard gasoline engine car vehicles. We're looking for solar collectors to run more of our energy needs within the county facilities on clean, renewable energy. And we have a tree planting program because we know that we need more trees to suck the carbon out of the air, and this is part of that program as well. And these aren't things that are pie in the sky. This isn't a speech. These are actual practical things that we hope to do, and hopefully we can do them together. So we'll come back for questions in just a second, but Nadia, I'd like to offer you the microphone to share some additional thoughts.
Hi, so again, my name is Nadia Hall, and I am the community environmentalist at Teatown Lake Reservation, and I'd like to thank the county executive and his entire team for having me here today. So at Teatown, we have a mission to inspire our community to environmental stewardship. And so through my position, I get the good fortune of working with many of the communities and the municipalities throughout Westchester to do just that and to work on sustainability initiatives. And so while I do that, I get the opportunity to not only see many of their successes, but to also hear about a lot of the challenges they have and about a lot of their needs for certain resources, access to data in order to move projects forward. And so they need this really hyper local data to figure out what's going on here and now, and we're really excited to have that. And so food's a particularly difficult subject because it's so ingrained into the biological and cultural fabric of who we are. It's there in times of celebration, it's there in times of mourning, it's there in times of boredom in the afternoon when we need a snack just to get us through the rest of the workday. And so it's a really difficult subject to tackle. And solutions are really twofold. One, it's a practice in mindfulness. It's what are we using and how are we using it? And the second half, the really important half, is having that data and having those resources that this study is really supporting us with. And so at Teatown, we're very excited to be partnering with the town of Ossining and with Supervisor Dana Levenberg on a food waste scrap recycling program in the town. And so we'll be able to use resources like this going forward. And so I'm sure that I speak for so many when I express my deepest gratitude for the county executive for taking this on and making sustainability a priority and for making these studies a priority so that we have these resources going forward. And a really big thank you to his entire team and everyone that worked on this so that we can do this, because it's not a small job to make these things not only happen, but then come out and then share it with everybody. So really thank you to everyone for doing this, and thank you for having me.
We're going to first open it up to our friends in the press. I know we're like 1,000 miles away from you. We'll do our best to try to answer the questions. If I can't hear it, perhaps they'll be repeated. If I need to consult with our panel of experts, I will. I'm waiting for them to kind of give me the sign that I've misspoken. So far, so good, gang? Okay. But any questions from the press, and you're welcome to interview any of the people in the room after we're finished with the formal part of the program, if you'd like. Any questions from the press? Then let me open it up to general questions from anybody in the audience who has something they'd like to say. Before I do that, let me compliment and recognize Ron Schulhoff, who's with us here, and his running buddy, Michelle Sterling, who is not with us today. But both of them have been very strong advocates for municipal efforts. I saw Ron and Michelle present in Mamaroneck. I was with Nancy Seligson that day at a community meeting. It's a couple of years ago, and they have brought a lot of energy to this issue, and we thank you for your leadership on that. First question was in the front row. Do we have? Yes, ma'am.
I want to stand up. Yeah, sure. I'm actually from Greenwich and the Sustainability Committee, so we're cribbing for your show, and you're paving the way for us. But I wanted to know, in your study, did you address green jobs that are coming from this? Is there any indication what kind of jobs would come and how many, and what are you looking at there?
You know, I don't think we asked the consultants when they looked at this to identify a specific connection to economic development. We are working separately on a 2030, we put a number on it, but a current economic development study, which isn't really quite underway yet. And one of the issues that group will study when they look at the future of job growth in Westchester County is how much of them will come from the green and renewable industry. So my sense is we didn't ask that of our consultants. Is that correct, Anthony? We didn't?
Correct.
All right. So I guess what I'll say is as we study that further, we'll be happy to share whatever numbers we have with you. And I know, your situation in Greenwich and the rest of Fairfield County is very analogous to ours, and we're happy to share across the dotted line whatever you think would be helpful. Okay. Any questions? I may not be able to see the person, but young lady with her hand raised, yeah.
Hi, I'm from New
collection, composting on a municipal level. But I had a question, the summer compost education.
Yes.
You did at one site. I'm not sure, are you using the term composting to include food scrap collection or to, as a difference, if you could just clarify.
The composting site that we intend on the Grasslands campus it'll be an actual compost site. We expect to do it in concert with a municipality that will provide the material, the food scraps, for the composting at that location. And we intend to, have that be for that community. Again, the size of the community would be relevant because of the amount of land we have available for that site. The purpose of that site then would be for people, New Rochelle, any community that do not have their own composting site, municipal composting site, and wants to consider creating one, to then come and look and talk to the people that are running it, go through all of the different logistics, because we're going to actually be doing it there on behalf of one community. And I would say that, and it may not just necessarily be New Rochelle, but any community that hasn't created a program now very well may not have done it because they were concerned about the transportation costs, which we're hopefully obviating it. And then also, if we can get to best practices by doing the things we've described, and they can plug into the best practices, then it makes it more likely that they can look at a site and do that. So I would say that, and of course, Damon, who's here, is a representative of New Rochelle. Catherine Parker represents a portion of New Rochelle, and I'm sure they're able to interact with the decision makers in your community, let them know what we're doing, and determine if there's a comparable set of circumstances in your community. Nancy?
Is the composting demonstration also going to be available to school groups?
Yeah, it'll be open to anybody that wants to come and see how it operates. School groups, it could be an institutional group. Let's say a nature center, Rye Nature Center, Weinberg Nature Center, Sheldrake said we want to create a composting situation. They may have the expertise in house, but if they feel like they want to see how we operate there, they would come and they would see and they would learn, and then they would be able to take examples back. And of course, we're going to be looking to learn too. We're going to be looking to try to get to best practices in this area, so that what we have will be a good, solid model to follow. But, and I had this conversation with Ron briefly, we're learning every day. And as I think most of you know, those of you who know me reasonably well, I never assume that I know everything that I need to know about something. So Nancy, we'll learn together and we'll improve it together. But it would be open to organizations, not just municipalities, to come and see how it operates. And hopefully it'll operate well. It'll be something we'll be proud of. So, yes, ma'am, on the aisle.
As we know, compost is great for gardens and the soil. Is there any way to get the compost from Ulster back to the communities for use? Is that part of the?
I don't think that's been part of our discussion. I'm not sure I know what Ulster does with the compost. It may be that they market it, and that's part of the profit that they make, and that establishes the rate that we pay just to deliver it to them. Is that roughly the sense of it? Okay. Pretty good guess on my part. But so I think the expectation is that we're going to have to determine how we want to use that which we compost and distribute it. There may be some ideas already about what we're going to do, and you're certainly welcome to interact with us if you have some thoughts specifically about that point as we go forward. There's a hand up on this side. Yes, sir.
Hello, Braden Cohen from Sustainable Materials Management, Westchester's first commercial food waste composting facility. What is happening with the digestate in that first part of the plan, the small digestate?
Yeah, the one at Wheelabrator.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, what the study did was outline for us what the cost would be and what some of the steps would be to implement it. And so now what we have to do, first as an executive branch and then with the legislature branch, is determining do we have the allocatable resources for that, to move in that direction. If we do, I assume we'll be having a discussion with Wheelabrator that will involve a legal arrangement to access the necessary amount of space. I'm also told that it is going to take a multiple number of years to go from zero, which is where we are now, to a functioning facility there. So there's a policy discussion to be had. At the capacity of 10,000 tons, that would be a very helpful step. I think we think of that as a mid-range step, because it can't be the ultimate step since it can't accommodate the total amount of tonnage we have. But since that's going to be a public dialogue, and I suspect if we have a proposal, and I'm not sure now, I've lost focus on who's chairing which committees in the county legislature. Nancy, Catherine will tell me, but the relevant county legislative committee will no doubt bring us all in to have that public dialogue and to determine. We'll tighten up the number. I gave you a range of $2 million. It's obviously can't, there has to be some specific number that we would look at and negotiate and determine before we go forward. But going forward would be a matter of a public decision, and if you or anybody else wanted to impact that public decision, you should know about it, and you'll have an opportunity to come and testify and do your thing. Okay? Sarah?
Yes. This is probably a question for Woodard and Curran, but I was wondering in the study whether you guys had looked at the capacity of the Ulster facility, given now that Westchester is going to be opening up a lot of municipalities probably.
That's a good question. Will Ulster reach maximum? Yeah, will it reach maximum?
Onslaught of food stamps.
Yes, please, Anthony, go ahead.
No, we didn't contact Ulster to understand specifically if they could handle this additional capacity. Those conversations were kind of the latter part of the study that we did. We do understand that, and this is not official in any way, but what we hear is that their current operations may be getting close to capacity, but they're looking at potentially acquiring additional land to expand their operations, which would lend itself very nicely to what the county is proposing right now. So that's something that I think that is part of this next step here in due diligence, to understand what that capacity is both now and if they do move forward with the property acquisition, and then look at that concurrently with what the county is looking at in terms of potential amount of compost food waste material that would be generated that they would be sending there. So it's really part of the next step as part of that due diligence process. We've done a little bit of it, but it's something that's really just ongoing at this point.
And let's ask Lou and Melissa also to comment on this.
Sure. The RFP that would go out, would go out to a hauler, it wouldn't be wed to Ulster County either. So there's a facility opening up in northern Westchester soon. So we're not just tied to that. The hauler could bring it to any facility that is going to recycle it and that qualifies as recycling under the law. That's going into effect in 2022. But we also had conversations with Ulster County while the report was going on, and as Anthony said, they're in the process of expanding the facility up in Ulster and increasing the capacity that they can get up there.
And we'll try to get, Sarah, since you raised it, we'll try to get a further update on that and get that out publicly so we know what the status of it is. Before I recognize Tom, I also want to recognize Ann Jaffe Holmes, who's with us here from Federated Conservationists of Westchester County. A very strong advocate for these actions and more. Tom Meyer from Yonkers.
County Executive, thanks for the study and thanks for presenting it in this fashion. We all know the financial cost of hauling it up upstate, and it's significant in our tipping costs. What's the difference in the carbon footprint cost? Because now we're going to be trucking this material up. What are we saving by doing a food scrap program, and what are we sacrificing in additional carbon output with trucks going up the thruway?
That's a very good question. Anthony, do we analyze that in the report, or do we have a comment from within the DEF?
Well, I'll just go ahead. Go ahead. I would just say...
It's a tough question. You take it. No, I'll take it.
I would give it to the consultant. I would say, briefly, we did look at greenhouse gas emissions, and we looked to rank the different options, the different options that the county executive laid out here, Commissioner. And what we found is, when looking at those different options and using as a baseline what's happening now with these individual municipalities are collecting the food waste and then it's going to Ulster County by one or multiple haulers, we found that if you were to co-locate a food waste processing facility, whether it's co-locating it next to the wastewater treatment plant and incorporating co-digestion, or co-locating it next to the waste-to-energy facility. With the wastewater treatment plant option, there's a digestate that needs to be managed. We've talked about that earlier. We need to look at how that digestate would be managed. Right now, a lot of digestate across the states is being managed through incineration, and we look to stay away from land application for the reasons that the county executive mentioned. But if you were to rank them, there is the option where it's co-located next to the wastewater treatment plant, and then that co-digestate, if it were to be incinerated, that ranks the highest in terms of the greatest reduction in greenhouse gas compared to what's happening now. So I don't know if that...
I think what Tom was actually asking was with the transportation and hauling program that we're going to be putting together, what would be, if any, the greenhouse gas savings on that? So the intent of that program is to have the county provide to the winning bidder a sealed, larger tractor trailer than what they're taking in now, so that the loads could be combined and there would be fewer trips up to Ulster or to any facility. So therefore, we would be reducing in that means. And we're also the pilot program. Part of the pilot program is going to be checking out and seeing what size trucks we can get up there in Ulster in order to tip there to continue that as the initial location for.
But we won't really be reducing, we'll be minimizing the increase in greenhouse, in carbon output. I mean,
just so
unless we're going to buy...
So what, just whoa, one at a time. Tom, make your point. Ron will recognize you in a second. Tom, go ahead. Make your full point, and then we'll get to the next person.
We're going to invest in CNG trucks or electric trucks. We're still going to be burning more carbon to get rid of the food.
Well, as more municipalities come on, that's not going to happen because right now it's going up in smaller loads. So there is going to be greenhouse gas savings there.
There'll be inefficiency.
Yes, inefficiency.
Let me also add one other thing, and then Ron, you will comment. Tom, what you also have to calculate is how much greenhouse gases are being affected by the amount that you segment that would go to Ulster that is currently being taken to Charles Point. So if you're looking at the fact that there's still transport that's going to Charles Point, for that portion that isn't going to be burned there, that's what's going to Ulster. So the positive of recycling a certain amount of this food, there might be some minus off of that because of the additional truck traffic, but that truck traffic is to some degree built in already in terms of the way we're disposing our garbage. So I'm sure there is a calculable number. I'm sure we'll try to figure out what that is, but I think those things factor in. Ron, you wanted to make a comment, and then we're just going to take 2 more questions after that.
It's a great question. I just want to even today, if you take the food scraps without all the efficiencies and everything else, it is a net savings to greenhouse gases versus bringing it to the incinerator. So I thank you for asking, and I just want to make sure everybody comes away with that.
Okay, I'm going to go Tom Roach and then Dana, and then other questions we'll have to do informally. Tom.
Some of the communities that are not doing it now is for the reason that Tom just pointed out. Send a diesel truck to the neighborhood to pick up food scraps, and then truck them to Ulster is not, I'll just say it's not great environmentally, but I appreciate this program because consolidating makes it less and mitigates the impact. But my question really is 2 things. First of all, great that we started out with a pitch to do it at home, because if you can do it at home and you really love the environment, do it at home because that's the best place to do it. Because then there's no trucking back. You get it right in your yard to use again. The other issue is I went with Peter and some county legislators. We went up to Connecticut to see a contained composting facility to capture the methane and use it to generate electricity. I've been to Quebec where they have a major program where they capture the methane, clean it, and put it into the pipelines as renewable natural gas, replacing fracked gas, and charging 4 times the rate of regular natural gas, and they get paid because companies like L'Oreal want to say 0 footprint. So that option 3, that long-term option 3, can you tell me that it's going to be perhaps changed?
We can tell you probably ain't going to be in White Plains. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Very good points. Yes. Okay, do you want to respond? Yes.
So I'm happy.
Yes, okay. And we'll close with Dana, and then other questions. I don't want to cut it off, but we are running late now. We'll try to answer them informally afterwards. Dana.
First, this is very exciting. Thanks for doing the study for the county. I think it's a great direction that we're moving, and I appreciate all the comments that you made leading up to that. Is it available to everyone? That's question number 1.
Yes, it would be available to every municipality once it's up and rolling.
No, the report.
Oh, the report, yes. We expect to have it online today, westchestergov.com.
And we'll put it on social.
And we'll put it on social media.
And then the question is just for Braden,
Braden, you want to give us an update on
And
it?
in terms of capacity, how does that compare to maybe capacity?
So we are closer than ever. Working really hard to be open by springtime, fingers crossed, if everything goes our way in terms of weather and machinery, and we're doing this ourselves. We're not hiring a contractor to come in and do this. So this is all in-house. We're also being very diligent in how we source our materials and what materials we use to build the facility to make sure we're doing it as sustainably as possible. So currently we are putting in our water catchment system. The majority of the aeration bays are built. This water catchment system is designed to mitigate any risk of leachate or any water that comes in contact with our composted materials, gets contained, processed safely. So, like I said, fingers crossed, springtime. And our facility will be accepting and processing 5,000 cubic yards of food waste and source separated organics, and then an accompanying approximately 15 to 25,000 cubic yards of tree free.
Thank you. Let me thank again Vince Kopicki and the DEF team in the room and the folks who've worked hard on this. We now have to implement, drafting up an RFP to implement the program for September. We hope to have the input from those who are experienced in dealing with this. As soon as we have further information, we'll share that with you. I previously mentioned Ellen Hendricks, who is our intergov liaison with municipal governments. She is a point of contact and then refer back out to departments on this particular issue as DEF would handle it. If there are any other questions, I miss Jason Lichtenthal from Newcastle, town member. Sorry, Jason. And hopefully we'll be able to resolve those things. I will just summarize by saying we'll talk informally in a second or two. You look for the report online, but I'll end where I started. Census, affordable housing, tourism, dealing with Medicaid, New Rochelle Family Court, and CDBG program. We got a lot of work to do. As with the other issues, we're just going to do the work we're supposed to do. Hopefully we can do it together. Thank you very much for being with us.